Good morning, Nick. How you doing?
Wrecker, my friend. Great.
Well, I'm not your brother anymore. I'm your
My
friend.
brother from another mother.
Okay, fair enough. Well, this is going to be a super interesting episode because, it kind of starts in the middle of something and nothing all between, right? So we have Vladimir Zwass on, who is, of course, the editor in chief of JMIS, and he's been that ever since the inception of that journal. It's like he's one of a kind. But this episode is also one of a kind because we're talking about this episode and we've already recorded it.
Yeah. So what we were doing is we were chatting a bit because neither you nor I met Vladimir before this call.
Yeah.
And we were chatting a bit, and then we turned on the recording, and then he kept going. So we hit him in progress. So that's what you're going to hear now is Vladimir continuing our pre-recording conversation.
Exactly. And we take you in basically at the point where we're talking about how he got started and what was his interest. And he takes us into the episode. So here we go, our episode with Vladimir.
I've always been interested in the interdisciplinary things. And, to a large degree, of course, information systems is an interdisciplinary field. And to be, sort of controversial, I mean, some people have been looking for paradigm. A paradigm is not to be found, and the paradigm, when found, is not to be necessarily a good thing. So, if you read Kuhn and if you think through Kuhn, you see that paradigm is stultifying, right? It's very nice for the field, but it's not good for knowledge. That is very controversial, I'm sure, and that's why I'm saying it. JMIS, when I was doing my PhD at Columbia University, I was working with Bill Vickery. Because what I was doing is, in effect, mechanism design in today's terms. I was doing it as a PhD in computer science, but my advisor, Ted Bashko, brought in a Bill when he realized that what I'm talking about is similar what Bill was talking about with auction design as a mechanism, with let's say, dynamic pricing in particular.
What year was this, Vladimir?
That was 1975, with God's help.
Okay.
Right, yeah. That was a while ago. So, I was open to that. Then I was working with Fritz Marklob of Princeton. Do you know his name?
I don't actually.
No.
You should.
Wait, what was the last name?
Fritz Marklob. Marklob was a professor at Princeton, and then he was working at NYU. At the time, Princeton had that limit, 65 or whatever. Marklob was one of the founders of the Mount Pelerin Society, Austrian economics. And he founded what is now known as information economy. He did the whole field, knowledge economy. He did some calculation. He came up with proof or something similar to a proof that 30% of GDP comes from information economy.
So wait, who are his students that we would know?
His students that he would know. I don't know. Look it up. But anyway, I'm not interested in his students, but I was very impressed, of course, by the intellectual caliber and by the brass, and you would understand Höflichkeit of Marklob. Marklob was, of course, a very senior figure, and anytime I would leave his office or his house in Princeton, he would insist on offering me my coat and so on, one of those true gentlemen and scientists, scholars. But at any rate, we were working on a book. I should show it to you. Why not?
So, guys, you can't see.
Yeah, we're doing a podcast, Vladimir. We can't see.
But what Vladimir is doing is going to this enormously filled office with bookshelves.
Right, his whole entire back of his office is filled, floor to ceiling books. What is this book called?
The Study of Information. In other words, this is how I discovered that the field of MIS, which didn't exist yet, didn't have major journal. The only thing that was
Right.
there is MISQ.
Well,
Yeah.
MISQ was 1977, I think, was its first publication, right? So
I would say, yeah, because mine was started JMIS in 1984. Right, so the only
84.
thing that
Okay.
was there was MISQ.
And you started it, right?
I started it, of course.
So you started it in 1984,
Yeah.
and you have been the only editor in chief since the
Yeah.
day you started it to now, and now you're in the whatever.
40 years here, that's how I said. It's 40 years here, yeah.
Wow.
So Vladimir, this is incredible. It really is. I mean, that means you were there in the years when the founding fathers, founded the disciplines, and all of the journals were in fact founded. Well, the difference is, of course, that we can't talk to the likes of Gary Dixon and others that founded MIS Quarterly because they're not here anymore. But you are, and you've been there. So my first question here is,
I like being here.
so was there already an exchange going on? So the way, to me as a European, I've always heard there was this group from Minnesota, this group from Minnesota that basically did a lot of steps to initiate the field. Was there already a connection there?
It's good you bring it up. There was a group in Minnesota, and that group essentially was into behavior. Okay.
Yeah.
However, when I founded the journal, the Arizona people with Jainana Maker,
Yes,
so happy, because my vision for the journal was that it should be multidisciplinary and multi-methodological and multi-thematical and open to new things. I felt that, of course, behavioral studies are, of course, crucial. And Minnesota group deserves tremendous credit for what they've done. But what Nanamaker and his people have done is bringing in the design research.
Yeah.
Not quite design science, but including the design science.
Yeah.
Yes.
The technical research, the economic research, a lot of. So you know what JMIS has that it kind of paved the way for these fast tracks was in Hicks. There's that Hicks track, and I forget who runs it. Is it who run where the best papers?
Kaufman, people
Clemens, right? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, and where the people who like the best papers from Hicks kind of have a fast track to JMIS in a way, right?
Whenever I can accommodate that. In other words, and whenever they have something to say as a group, as a special section or a special issue. So it's not like lease space or anything like that, but it's a very important input. It brings in much life into the journal. Those are the things that are current, more current than otherwise, and then they're being developed by the guest editors, of course, with my input. And that is extremely important. This year, for example, we have a special issue by Gertjan de Verde and Nanamaker. And next year we shall see. But one way or another, it shouldn't be limited to Minnesota. I would say it's Minnesota and Arizona in parallel.
Yeah.
We're founding.
Where's this connection to Hicks actually coming from? So I understand it's been there from the start, right? JMIS has always had this fast track to Hicks. Is this because there was a conference you attended all the time, or why is that?
I don't truly remember, but the Clemens approached me from Wharton or whatever, that idea of having the special section.
Okay.
Or something like that. And but then I had people with whom I worked from the beginning and who were extremely supportive, and I should name them. Of course, Nanamaker, Ted Store, people like that.
Stevens,
that's the generation that was doing it. Isaac Ben Basat at the time and so on.
So, Recker, there's something that just happened that came to my attention this morning that is it's incredible, and it involves JMIS. What happened is they have this special issue. I think the deadline has been moved to June 20th or something for
the metaverse.
For the metaverse.
Yes.
Right. And here's what happened. They're using a editorial system of some sort.
No.
Vladimir, you're the only journal
This is the only journal where you send an email to Vladimir with your paper, and then at some stage you get an email back. That's how
and
it
you
works.
manage it with email, and you send these emails around, and you manage all the submissions. You manage all via email. So the fact that you're using an editorial manager, how do you manage all this via email? What's that process? Tell us about it.
It's very easy. There's nothing to it. I mean, I've tried. Of course, Taylor and Francis has a system. And, it doesn't do anything for me. It's a waste of time. I manage it extremely well with that, and that's been said. In other words, there's never been a review failure. That is a technicality. It's not an issue.
But you must have hundreds of thousands of submissions. How do you keep track of them?
Hundreds of thousands, probably.
Hundreds or thousands.
Since the beginning. But annually, about 600 type of thing. Yeah,
well, that's a lot of emails. Yeah,
luckily or not luckily, a large number, of course, are immediate rejections.
Yeah,
the journal is a top-level journal; it's FT50 journal, and people should sort of calibrate the submission always. And we'll be talking, I hope, about that, which is substantive input to people to the journal.
Well, wait, do you desk reject it? So you read the 600 before you send them out to people?
What do you mean by reading?
I don't know. How do you decide what to reject? I mean, 600, your whole life has to be managing this journal then.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
Very well.
And then you'll do the desk rejects, or will you send it to someone to give them feedback?
The desk rejects generally come from me unless I have a doubt. I have an editorial board. Editorial board has always consisted of the leaders of the profession. In other words, the thought leaders, the people who really know the audience, and distinguished people. It's always been like that, and luckily it's balanced. In terms of the men, women, in terms of territorial distribution, and so on. So all of that is working very well, but it's pretty obvious to me right away. Let me tell you. Let me, for example, give you the shortcuts that I use, the heuristics. You know where I began and where I think everyone should begin, and that is the references. Nobody thinks of that. It's not like I read every reference, but I look through, are those people coming from the top-level journals? Are they familiar with the literature in that particular segment? Are they referencing things to 2022 or to 2018? Where is their mind in general? What intellectual level is the paper? Then, obviously, I have the title. If someone gives me a title that is 3 lines long, well, that paper probably is not good.
Yeah.
Another thing, that people should think about right away, that there's only one opportunity to make a first impression.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a big point, I think. Yeah.
That's a big point, and people don't realize it. Abstract is a selling piece. It's faking it, but it's selling it. In other words, why the hell is that paper important? Why is the world a better place if this paper will be ultimately published after several reviews? We get out of that. Then some people believe in this acronym machismo. In other words, the more acronyms you can, cram into a paper, or particularly the abstract on introduction, the better the paper looks. Well, it doesn't.
Yeah,
I always thought that's
it's these Germans. Vladimir,
yeah, exactly. It's a German.
It's the Germans. They do that. All the Germans do that. They think acronyms are better than words. Whenever they can use an acronym, they'll use an acronym instead of a word.
I agree. I actually agree.
Our own people, the Americans, let's say, who do the same thing, and I always try to. Obviously, that's not why I reject the paper, but that's why the reviewers, who are always the most prominent people in the field, will be turned off. Then another thing, when you write an abstract, not sure your experience, but when people write an abstract, usually the last line is implications for theory and practice will follow in the paper. Don't be the paper
doesn't
is
say
about
anything.
Implications. That's what the paper is about. Sell it.
Yeah.
In
I
other
agree.
words, the significance,
Yeah.
it's not only rigor and relevance and whatnot, it's the contribution, not contribution to the gap. What is a gap?
Yeah.
A gap might be well deserved. I mean, it's simply something no one looked at because it's not worth looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
If you expressly tell me, well, companies have problems with that, people have cognitive issues with this, and this is what's been done so far, and here is the motivation, right? That is another effort. So those things are very important in the Gestalt.
So Vladimir, I do want to get into that a little bit more, but you mentioned references first. And I'll tell you, in this, I don't know if this is horrible, but this is, so I submitted my first paper to JMIS in 2004 or 2005 or something like that. I was a first or second year PhD student.
So did I. 2005
and it was in
6 for me,
paper.
yeah.
And I had to send paper to you, and a big thing of paper came back to me, and I got rejected. But
Same here.
And then after that, it went digital. And then my second time I submitted to your journal was a year or two ago. So it's been 20 years almost. And then I got accepted, and it was a wonderful experience. I'll tell you why I don't submit it, and it sounds like an awful thing. I write a lot of papers. I don't submit them to JMIS normally, even though I read the journal and I love a lot of articles I cite, right? It's because of references. It's because I don't use a reference manager or something, and you require that we use the numbers 1 and 2 and 3.
Never happened.
Huh?
In other words, I really don't give a damn about the format of the references as the
So
paper.
I can go ahead and send it a normal paper. I don't have to be that.
Send the paper with any sort of aligning of the references. Not once did I reject the paper, ask for a preliminary revision because the references were not numbered. I couldn't care less.
Oh,
Fair
well,
enough.
see, this kept me from submitting because that's what the format requirements are on the website. So I wouldn't submit because I would have to take all my references, make them numbers, and then I'm just like, oh, I'll send it to another journal. So I don't have
and that is inconvenient also in terms of updating the references during the revisions. Maybe, thank you for that input, and I'll put it that in the final format, the publishers wanted I've always wanted it numbered. But that's basically neither here nor there.
I know it has nothing to do with the journal or my experience or the substance. Now, I did this paper, one of my co-authors, Carolina Salge at University of Georgia, she said, I'll handle all the references, don't worry about it. And so then it was easy. But because she used a reference manager. Since I don't do that it had nothing to do with the paper. And I probably have papers that maybe could have succeeded there and that I never submitted because of something so silly. But yeah.
Again, in journal terms, what I want from the journal and what I continue to want, and I've always wanted, is openness. I get, just like you guys, but on the opposite side, I got emails. I just got from Tony Vance, I think. Well, I reviewed the paper, and here's the review. And by the way, thank you so much for publishing my original work when I was a PhD student, and that's my career. So, it frankly things depend on the paper. Now,
of course.
for example, next, speaking of your recent paper, I absolutely loved it that you had this meta-analysis in the interpretive mode. Now, that is new, interesting, and brings in life. I want life. Sometimes you read those advices for students. Well, read 3 or 4 papers and then see how you can make a similar paper. Well, that's not what publishing is all about in information systems. It's about solving problems that are real. It's about adding to knowledge that is today. That's why we have the special issue on metaverse. Now we have the special issue on generative AI. Because that is, this is major.
Yeah.
So, Vladimir, in preparing for today, I was actually reading your most recent editorial, right? So it's the 40th volume, so it's been 40 years in existence. And you had a very interesting editorial because you basically said journals serve 3 purposes: an epistemic purpose, an instrumental, and a societal purpose. And I thought we could talk a little bit about this, right? So you alluded to some of the points. So the epistemic purpose, if I understood you correctly, you said like, look, our purpose is to accumulate knowledge, but you have a particular twist on this multi-methodological, very open, very diverse set of scholarship. And I think most people don't realize this. And I agree with you. You referenced Jay Nunemaker. People, especially younger folks, they tend to associate design research with Al Hefner, 2004, design science, Europe, and whatever. But the reality is there were people in Arizona, especially Jay Nunemaker and others, they've done true design stuff, not toy applications, really big systems ever since the 70s. And it's also true that JMIS published design research long before the design science research paper and the 2004 paper, right?
Absolutely. And when Simon's book, The Sciences of the Artificial, came out, I was totally, as we say in German, begeistert. This level of thinker produces this level of work that goes along with my thinking. And I think our discipline would be much impoverished if we did not pursue that with a full vigor. Yeah. So again, in terms of epistemic, that's what we are paid for, so to say. This is what we are supposed to be doing, right? We have to add to knowledge. We add to knowledge that is within the discipline, but JMIS has always interpreted the limits of the discipline very broadly. In other words, it is very infrequent that I have to reject a paper because it has nothing to do with the discipline of information systems. Very infrequent. And I also feel that it is one of the purposes of the top journals, let's say FT50 level journals, to evolve and broaden the limits of the discipline. Look, where I started, research was, what was it? Systems design and analysis, database design on the logical level, semantic level, that sort of thing. Look, where are we now? And by the way, this is where we should be, because we have to, that's another major point. Many people think internalistically. In other words, within the discipline. They don't look out and see what the discipline can do at the world. Look at the moment in time. We are with generative AI, there are catastrophes, there are polyanders, but one way or another, we should be concerned. In other words, and the world is concerned, if you looked at the most recent issue of The Economist, which is certainly a journal of record, you see that the cover stories on AI, they're very solid stories there, and people are concerned.
Yeah.
So
they are,
we should evolve the discipline with the world, and we have to. Well, metaverse, it doesn't exist. It will probably never exist as spoken about.
And this is a little bit what I read into your societal purpose, right? The third purpose that you mentioned.
Yes.
And I thought it was striking because you mentioned that, journals also serve a need because we need to contribute to the well-being of society.
Yes.
And it's an interesting one because not every journal is actually explicit about this. If you read the mission statements of many journals, they talk about advancing knowledge, building accumulated tradition, theoretical contributions, and still conjure this ivory tower image. Right. That you can also argue for that there's a place in this world where we have to develop abstract thinking, develop theories, etc. But you very purposefully said, well, we got to help make the world a better place. That's basically what you're saying there.
Absolutely. And I think in this day and age, we have those epochal changes, we have epochal challenges. We have made epochal trouble as information scientists, as computer scientists. Look at the internet. It brought a lot of happiness. It also brought a lot of, concerns, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. So we are responsible. We should be looking at that. And again, the societal concern, for example, people can say, well, this paper is health informatics. It's not information systems. Well, I say nonsense. Health informatics is a kind of informatics. It's an applied area of informatics where we have something to say. Where we have an endowment, we have, as you said, several thousand people who can work on those issues. So that is very important.
But the counter argument, of course, could be that you're a business journal. Most IS people are in a business school. What are we dealing with societal problems? That's why we have sociology for. What are we doing there? Why are we not helping firms organize themselves better and help understand markets and God knows what else.
That gets us into the broader discussion. What is the purpose of the firms? And as you know, now it's being contested. And one way or another, whether you believe that it's a stakeholder theory or stockholder theory, whether it's Milton Friedman or other people, people at large expect more from the organizations than profit. Yeah. There is no question. Yeah. Everyone would agree with that. So that brings us to the fact that we have to contribute to more than the internal functioning of an organization and more to the societal role of the organization, and then we are implicated. I would like, for example, to see also for our society to make a statement on what we do think about artificial intelligence in generative mode. We have to start thinking about artificial intelligence products and systems as partners. For example, Alan Dennis has a paper now about the virtual team members.
Yeah.
But we have to start thinking that way, and that takes us far away from what was here 40 years ago.
All right, so Vladimir, this is what I'm hearing. That JMIS, of course, it's one of our elite journals. It's doing big tent, a lot of different things, open to diversity. If I'm a PhD student or an assistant professor somewhere, and I'm looking to publish my manuscript that I think I'm very proud of. Clearly, there are 3 to 4 top journals, right, in the IS field. Certainly, MISQ and ISR and JMIS throughout my entire career were the 3. Why would I submit to JMIS instead of, say, MISQ and now JAIS is doing a lot of interesting things, and many people consider it in that same conversation, so that we have 4 top journals. They've done a tremendous job in the last 20 years. So let's say that we have 3 to 4 top journals. Why they all claim to be big tent. They all have, policy. They all want diversity to more or less of a degree. Now that Supra's at ISR, I'm sure we're going to hear that, he's a qualitative guy and they do a lot of technical and econometric stuff as well. So I guess that's my question to you. Is there a differentiation among these journals in your mind, or are they all doing similar stuff?
Well, there's definite differentiation in my mind. There's not differentiation on my tongue necessarily, because that is not what I want to do. But obviously I have my opinions, and they're best not voiced. Better talk about JMIS. I would, when I've always worked on my own work, I go with the references. In other words, obviously, the 3 FT50 journals are being read broadly. And I see where my thinking is coming from and what are the top papers behind my research. And I would pick the paper behind the venue on that premise. I would do that. Be entirely objective. I like the particular journal, the way JMIS, as you know, in AIS, this review quality, the most recent one, took the top place with MISQ on quality of the reviews, but also JMIS is the top on timeliness.
Nice.
So how do you operate this? I'm curious. To me, JMS is a little bit of a dark horse because, first of all, you don't seem to have senior editors and associate editors. You have a big board with very, very big names on it. Absolutely. But all I know is I send you an email with my submission, and at some stage you get an email back with a whole bunch of Word attachments, which are the reviews. What happens in between? Is there something like an AE or an SE role in your journal?
Look, the bureaucracy of the journals has been, I don't know, to me it's ridiculous. All it does, it introduces the delay, latency, whichever way you want to call it. It does not contribute to quality, in my experience, and in talking to people. To me, the primary guarantors of quality are the reviewers. And the reviewers have to be well chosen. And if the review by AIS tells me that my reviewers are on top, that means they're well chosen. People like the reviews, people respond to the reviews. The reviewers are supposed to have the patience to go through the iterations. The reviewers should also tell me honestly what they think about the paper, and the rejections follow early. So the timeliness is a very big component, and what we do, and also openness, of course.
So, Vladimir, what I'm hearing, let me just play that back. So what I'm hearing is you're saying, look, I don't do much about these editorial board structures and layering. I just send it to very good people, they're very good peers, and I'll listen to them, which also then implies to me that it is really the author's job to convince these reviewers. That's their main job. They don't need to find a...
Author, of course.
So it's a very slim review model.
I welcome the suggestions for the reviewers. And by the way, that's another marker for me. When people send me the suggested reviewers who are, from around the corner, or people who are, let's say, not the top journal quality, then that sounds, but that is a suggestion. I do try, when it sort of corresponds to what I believe the reviewers should be, I try to pick people from that list, at least some. We usually have 3 or 4 reviewers. But I do not rely on that. And in some cases, by the way, when people suggest the reviewers, they're not careful.
Yeah, I agree.
Sometimes I send to the reviewers and they say, look, I don't know anything about that field. Now, that right away is, that's not a good marker.
I agree. And I think what people are doing very often is they try to pick friends or friendly people, not really the people that are really well qualified, to evaluate whatever the contribution is. And I think that's a mistake also, because I think the people that are well qualified, they like receiving papers in their area. They like that someone else is also working in this area. So
not only that, but this is something I've noticed, is that oftentimes if people are likable people, everybody thinks, oh, that's a nice person, I'll send them my paper. Some of those likable people are the meanest reviewers.
Yes.
And then some of the toughest, kind of gruffest, meanest people that you think are not very personable, when you say they're the most constructive, substantive, intellectually rigorous reviewers, and they're the ones you want strengthening your paper, right?
I agree.
My source of reviewers, where do they come from? Well, obviously, I have 80 pages of reviewers, but where they originally come from, they've published a paper in JMIS that is an important paper. That's where they come from.
So Vladimir, this is what I'm curious about. You've been doing this for 40 years. It's incredible. You've led this journal that's had such an impact on so many lives and careers, right? You say it appears to be almost a full-time job for you, right? Yeah. 600 of these every year. You're managing them, each one carefully and by hand. So that's pretty impressive. At one point, you have to be thinking about retirement. No? Is that in the horizon, or it doesn't even enter your mind? Like you don't.
It does enter my mind, but it doesn't enter my desires. In other words, I lead a very comfortable life. I travel with my wife. We have grandchildren. We have very important in-laws. We have a life that is compatible with what I'm doing. And I'm very confident. Also, it's intellectually stimulating to me. I still have all my marbles, thank God, and more. You accumulate the experience, and it's sort of you have to live a full life, and this is my contribution to the community, as you said, the lasting contribution.
It is, absolutely. I want to go back to 1984. I'm curious about this. So if I understood you correctly, you would have been a relatively junior scholar then, right?
I was associate professor.
Exactly, right? So you were not a chair full professor with 20 years of experience to yourself, and you founded a new journal. Now, all of the academic career advice I've ever heard was always saying, like, don't do that. Like, just don't found your own journal. It's one of the worst things you could ever do. And yet you did it. Why did you do it?
I had tenure.
Yeah. Okay. So you had the freedom to do so.
Yeah.
But so that, in terms of that gives you the opportunity, but it's not a motive. What was the motive?
Well, the motive is, again, I've always liked the accumulation of knowledge through journals. My father was a well-known economist, and of course he was also, so to say, a person of stature otherwise. And I watched his publications. It was inculcated in me. And of course, at Columbia, we had that, culture built around the journals, because print journals at the time. So, I knew people, and, I thought I could put it all together. And also, of course, the main reason for success was the dire need. Again, frankly, MIS, IS was not a field yet.
Yeah.
It was just a sort of random aggregation of people. So it was a low barrier to entry as well.
So I'm trying to remember. So 1984. So we would have MISQ was a couple of years old. There's no ISR yet. There's no JMIS yet. There's no of the European journals. They didn't exist yet either.
Nothing.
So what did people do back then? So they published somewhere.
Well, that's why they welcomed me so much.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what people did. What did they deliver? ISIS was around, and that played, of course, a crucial role in the formation of the field. I don't think Higgs was around. But, again, there were not so many people. There were not thousands of people either. So somehow people, I don't know, muddle through, as they say in sociology.
Yeah. So Vladimir, I just wanted to point out, I think of you as a conservative force in a sense on our research stream. And I'm looking at, I know Rick Watson, who I used to work with at University of Georgia, had some proposals that he was promoting around changing the review process, right? And there were responses to the review process and to his proposals, one of which was certify reviewers, and he had a number of ideas. And I looked at and this is back in like 2006 or something like that. And you seem to argue against these proposals. You're like, well, who will certify the certifiers? This is a lot of, you seem to handle that. You get highly qualified people and you publish really nice. Do you see now, after having done it for 40 years, is it heading in do you think that the process you have is the right one? There seems to be more publications, more co-authors, more of a demand on reviewers. Do we have to change things, or is the model fine?
Well, Rick Watson comes up with a number of ideas, which is, of course, to his credit. And at the same time, the peer review process is like democracy, Everyone bitches about that and everyone complains about that, but there's nothing that can be done about that other than making the double-blind review better. For example, The Economist, which takes a great interest in the progress of science, and I give them every credit for that. And they've been trying to battle the review process, and they lost because basically they said, well, didn't come up with anything better than that.
Yeah.
So in other words, certainly in terms of a validation, elaboration of knowledge, putting it into good currency, I would say the voice of reason, but I would also say the force that needs to preserve the integrity of scientific process. And again, by introducing also new things. Now you have, let's say, Wimsatt and other people in the philosophy of science who have finally read the book of Herbert Simon from some 50 years ago, and they say, oh yeah, mechanism, design, mechanistic, whatever it's applied to biology, it's a good thing. Well, of course, it's always been a good thing. So methodologically, thematically, I'm absolutely the voice of progress in terms of handling the knowledge. I haven't seen anything more careful and more well thought through, having read many thousands of reviews, than the double-blind review process. And I don't see that anyone is changing it looking at ISR or MISQ.
Or anywhere else, really. I mean, the only thing that people are doing is just creating a little bit of transparency about the double-blind peer review, right? So sort of publishing the reviews after the fact of stuff like this, but it doesn't change the nature of the review process itself.
Yeah, the thing that gets me, though, is and there is a tremendous inefficiency in our field and tremendous waste of resources with these rejections, right? I send my paper to JMIS. 3 reviewers. Maybe I even go an extra round, 3 reviewers, right? Then I get rejected. Then I send it to whatever, JAIS. It goes through 3 rounds there. I've used 3 different reviewers now for 2 years. They're saying a lot of the similar things. Then I go to European Journal of Information, whatever. I try it. I've now had 12 people handling my paper, reading it, saying the same thing. Think of those tremendous resources we've wasted. One would think there could be a way to do a double-blind review without necessarily such redundancy for the field overall, right?
Well, there could be simple steps to take. So, for example, if all authors would truthfully disclose the entire submission history so that the 4th journal know that they're the 4th journal, right, and that it has been rejected 3 times before, that would actually...
Who wants another journal's rejects?
Yeah, well, of course, that's why no one is doing that.
No, I just, now I have a paper on a very successful review, actually coming from Germany, on a very successful review line, now in the 2nd revision, I believe, and the top author tells me, look, it was in this journal before, and they had this objection and went through 4 reviews, and that was rejected there. But I have fixed it in such and such way, and the paper is excellent. It's a highly contributing paper. I don't have any ambition to be a virgin in a paper submission.
So I have a question for you, Vladimir. In your 40 years of experience of an editor-in-chief, have you ever gotten a submission and just accepted it, published it straight away? It's like, this is the greatest paper, I gotta publish it.
No, never. Because I wouldn't take it upon myself to be the judge and the jury, and of course not an executioner in this case, but And
after one round, like after the reviews came back, they all were positive, and it went through one round of review, and the verdict was accept as is.
That happened a few times, yes. Usually not in JMIS because it's such a demanding journal. But yes, but it's amazing what quality of reviews I get uniformly. 3 pages, sometimes 8 pages, very detailed, very well. I mean, those people are essentially writing a paper about the paper. It's very impressive, and I totally, chapeau to those people who review.
I agree. I don't think we have a problem with review quality in our field altogether. Like I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So the quality of the reviews, I think, has increased. And it's very rare that you actually get a really bad review.
So wait, I have a question for Vladimir about your process. I know I'm an editor at MISQ, and sometimes I'll get reviews and I'll actually go against them because I believe in something about the paper that I think the reviewers are too focused on the trees. I'm looking at it from a broader perspective, and I think there's something to like about the paper. So sometimes, I'll go against maybe an associate editor. I'll go against maybe a couple of the reviewers. Do you ever do that where like 2 of the reviewers are saying reject, one reviewer says accept or give them a revision, and you kind of go against the rejection reviewers or against an entire panel of rejections, or you pretty much go with majority?
That's a fair question. Whenever there's a contentious situation that I do not feel can be resolved based on the reviews that I have, which doesn't happen frequently. It goes to an associate editor, a member of the editorial board, who is highly qualified. So in other words, I'm not the judge and the jury. Usually, though, again, it's amazing. The reviewers generally agree. But in quite many cases, I use associate editors. And, obviously that slows down things, but fairly so. And it gives let's say, the assistants, maybe not. Maybe it goes against the author. But yes, I definitely don't take it upon myself to then be the final judge. But by the way, that is not what, let's say, Rick Watson means by ombudsman. Ombudsman is talking about is again a nice idea, but essentially that is an advocate for the author. I don't need advocates for authors. The authors are, in the hierarchy of publishing, they are on the top. Those are the people who entrust the intellectual property, the time, the careers to a journal. they should get every respect and every consideration. In other words, if I am supposed to lean some way, I lean towards the authors. Because as you said, Nick, I mean, the delay and the submitting and whatever. And some people are intimidated, particularly the junior authors. And I want to tell them that even though we publish, Brynjolfsson and whoever, I mean, the thought leaders, that doesn't mean we only want to publish established thought leaders. Quite to the contrary, we want to bring in on board and lift up younger people, PhD students from all over the world, and the junior faculty. It's very important for the field, of course, for them, and so on.
Yeah, Recker, this is the first time I've heard this. Like the default is in favor of the author, and you know what?
I thought the same thing, Nick. Yeah, exactly.
So this is what I don't like about academia. And sometimes I talk about how you've arrived, you're a full professor. Vladimir Recker is the nucleus professor in Germany, right? So he's a very important professor in Germany. And what I always joke is that he's made it. So now he's pulling up the ladder behind him so nobody can achieve as much as he has.
No, he just sets down other ladders.
but there are two things.
Rope, yeah.
But I think there are two things that we do to our young faculty. The first is we make it very difficult to publish in a journal, and we make it very risk averse. So anything there, so it's kind of elitist. For those of us who are in and we've published, we make it hard. They have to jump through all sorts of hoops, and if they mess up, they get rejected.
Who is we now?
Well, the field, the structures that have been embedded in the field, right? So to hear that you're giving them the benefit of the doubt is a wonderful thing. The other thing,
this question. Well, sorry,
okay, let me just give you the one other thing that's the same thing, and it's tenure. It's this idea that these tenured professors sit there and then they hire a young professor. The young professor moves to their city. They move their family to their city. They're they're raising their family in the area. They're working their butts off. And then they go up for tenure. And then the existing tenured professors look at them and go, oh, maybe one more publication. And they would have, we have this kind of, you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't look at their intellect anymore. You just
you should move to Germany, then you'll see something.
Well, that's the other extreme, right? Well, that used to be. They're changing, of course, right?
And they look at the United Kingdom, the bureaucracy, academic bureaucracy, is eating them alive. I mean, it is
eating them alive. Absolutely, yeah. And it's carrying over. It's carrying over. I saw it being carried over to Australia already 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This British managerialism and your assessments and your reporting and all the other stuff and the metrification of every little academic activity, your services, everything was metrified and compared to numbers. I remember that at some stage I had to disclose whether or not I hit a particular dollar figure in research income in any given year, and it was a precise figure, with decimal points behind them. And it was and I thought it was absolutely crazy. Yeah, so you have a point. I wanted to take Nick's first statement and turn this around a little bit. Vladimir, with your perspective of these 40 years, well, be honest, is it easier or harder to get a paper published in JMIS now than it was 20 years ago?
Well, we have expanded, of course, over time, so there's more room. And, it's intellectually tougher, there's no question. Because the whole field, in my observation, has gotten much more muscular intellectually. Yeah. We have very good brains. We have people who are willing to work hard. We have also become really global. Yeah. I mean, people, I don't want to name specific countries, but there are at least 10 countries that have come up to the top level. It was never there. It was always the United States publications. So, I'm very happy about that because obviously there are different perspectives. And again, the more smart people, the better for the field.
I wanted to join that another question that I had. Forget content and forget quality of intellectual contribution. Think people. So is our community, is there a community or a set of people that are constituting the field? Is that moving in the right direction? Are we friendlier than we were before? Are we more embracing, more inclusive, or are we just, more jerks?
I think we are more inclusive. I mean, there's no question we are more inclusive. the more people, the more jerks. I mean, that's just the mathematics, right? I mean,
Yeah, fair enough.
first grade mathematics, right?
Yeah.
I know who the jerks are, and people who are essentially nasty and try to use their positions to basically do things they shouldn't have been doing. But again, we sort of, in our lives, we always go around those people, and somehow you've been successful. I thank God have been successful. So I think the field, the one thing I would say about the field, though, the field doesn't project. And that is something that bothers me. That probably goes to the A's, the society. The field should collect the brains, put in the statements, let's say, about artificial intelligence, about metaverse, about what is coming down the pike. I would say ACM is a very good example. Now, of course, it's easy to be ACM because they were founded in 1947, I believe. They have probably 200,000 members. I don't know the figure, but they do project. They do project. And I feel that our field designing more would project better.
So what you're saying is we're too timid. Yeah, we're still too much in
too
the
timid
anxiety.
Yeah.
So the way that I always put it is we still have a little man syndrome. We're still fighting
Yes.
to establish ourselves, overlooking that we've established ourselves a long time ago.
Yeah, we have a paradigm. What is the paradigm? Is that within the field? Is that outside of the field? That we're eating ourselves alive, with that nonsense,
So, well, Vladimir, so we have to wrap up soon. Also, we're quite conscious that you have 600 papers to go through. But so, as Nick said, we get all these people, they're commenting on us and saying, like, tell us how to get published, tell us how to have a good career. So I would like to ask you a very standard question. The standard question to wrap things up would be, what would you say to a junior scholar, building their careers? What career advice would you give them?
Well, let's say a bit above my pay grade, but the career advice is to submit early in the PhD process.
Okay.
I published several papers that were first authored by senior PhD students, even mid-level PhD students. With the support of the advisors, colleagues, and whatever, they get to the JMIS quality and they get published and make me extremely happy, because obviously they're the future of the discipline. So the field is pushed towards that. Another one is to be prominent in the conferences, to network. Go to the conferences, network, meet the people in your subfield, meet interesting people, make yourself known, talk, present, be there.
That's good advice. And present well. Don't do a lame academic job presenting. But I do like the idea. I mean, imagine going to the job market with a JMIS already on your resume, right? I think people would hire you.
Well, I can say this for Region 2, at least here in Germany. I know like several people have had wonderful careers that were founded on a JMIS article. That's actually a lot. It's quite popular with the German academic community, maybe also because Higgs is very popular with the German academic community.
And also more so with the FT50, right? So
of course,
the JMIS,
yeah, FT50 does it, yeah. But again, that's thank you for saying that. And again, considering, thank you so much for talking to me.
Yeah, this was fun.
This was really fun, Vladimir. I was laughing a lot during this episode. Yeah.
I expected to have fun, and I got it. Thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.